Most men spend their lives secretly worrying that their penis might be too small. But here's the shocking truth. As you age, it's not the small penis you should fear, it's the large one. Yes, the very thing so many men envy and dream about can actually bring pain, humiliation, and serious medical problems. I've seen lives ruined not because a man was too small, but because he was too big. I'm Dr. Mohit Kara, a board-certified urologist and men's health specialist with over 30 years of experience helping men navigate the challenges of aging, intimacy, and vitality. I've examined and counseled tens of thousands of men, and I can tell you with certainty, size is far more complicated than most people ever realize. Think about it. The world tells you bigger is always better, but in reality, larger penises carry higher risks of injury, greater medical complications, and difficulties in everyday life. I've met men who would gladly trade size for peace of mind, comfort with their partner, or even the ability to use a public restroom without embarrassment. That's why today, I want to reveal 5 hidden truths about large penises that every man over 60 must hear. These are not jokes, not myths, not exaggerations. They are lessons from decades of clinical practice, backed by medical evidence and real patient stories. And stay with me until the end, because the 5th truth may surprise you most of all. It's not about sex, not about health, but about your reputation, your dignity, and how the world sees you as a man. You won't want to miss it. Before we get started, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of my future advice on men's health after 60. And if this topic speaks to you, drop a 1 in the comments below. If not, leave a 0, so I know how to improve and bring you the guidance you truly need. Now that you understand why bigger isn't always better, let's begin with the first truth. It's one that shocks many men, but it's backed by hard medical reality. A large penis is far more likely to break during sex. Yes, penile fracture is real, painful, and devastating. Truth number 1. The risk of penile fracture, a broken manhood. Let me start with something that very few men over 60 ever think about, yet it is one of the most dramatic dangers I see in my work as a urologist. It's the reality of penile fracture. Now, I know what you might be thinking. How can something break if it doesn't have a bone? The penis is not made of bone, that's true, but once it becomes erect, it transforms from something soft and flexible into a rigid organ under tremendous internal pressure. Inside are 2 chambers called the corpora cavernosa, surrounded by a tough fibrous tissue called the tunica albuginea. When blood rushes in and the pressure rises, that tissue stretches tight, creating firmness. And that's exactly when the risk begins. Think of it like a garden hose filled with water at full pressure. If it's bent sharply, the wall can rupture. A penis works in a similar way. One sudden thrust at the wrong angle, one slip in the heat of the moment, and that tough fibrous layer can tear. The sound is unforgettable, described by many men as a loud crack or pop. What follows is pain, swelling, bruising, and sometimes a bend so severe it's impossible to ignore. For many men, the urethra is injured too, leaving them unable to urinate. In medicine, we call this a true emergency. Without immediate surgery, the chance of permanent erectile dysfunction is nearly certain. Now here's the part most men don't realize. The larger the penis, the higher the risk. Physics doesn't lie. More length creates more leverage, and more leverage means more torque on that fibrous tissue during sex. A big penis may look impressive, but in reality, it's mechanically more vulnerable. I've treated men who came into the hospital ashamed and devastated, and often they were the ones who had been told their size was a blessing. Instead, it became their greatest curse. One patient stays in my memory vividly. He was in his early 60s, proud of his size his whole life, but one night, in the middle of intercourse, he heard that unmistakable crack. Within minutes, his erection collapsed, his penis swelled, and his world turned upside down. He told me in tears that he had always thought being bigger protected him from problems. He never imagined it would be the very reason he was now facing surgery, terrified he'd never be able to perform again. For men over 60, recovery is even harder. Healing is slower, scar tissue forms more easily, and the psychological weight of losing function is heavier. It's not just the body that suffers, but the spirit as well. So if you've ever envied a larger size, remember this: with greater size comes greater risk. Penile fracture may sound like a rare accident, but in truth, it happens more often than most men realize, and the consequences can last a lifetime. And while this danger alone is enough to make any man reconsider his wish for a larger penis, it is only the beginning. Because beyond the risk of fracture lies another hidden reality that men rarely think about until it's too late: the serious complications that appear when medicine and surgery meet a penis that's simply too long. And that is the second truth you need to hear. Truth number 2: surgery and medicine don't fit large penises. As men grow older, the conversation about health almost always turns to the prostate. By the time you reach your 60s, chances are you will experience some form of prostate enlargement. It's one of the most common issues I see in my patients, and while medication can help, many men eventually need procedures or surgery to manage it. Here's where the problem begins for men with larger penises. Every surgical tool, every catheter, every scope that we use in urology is designed for the average male anatomy. They are tested, standardized, and manufactured to fit what's statistically most common. But when the penis is unusually long, those tools often come up short, literally. I remember one patient clearly. He was a tall, broad man in his late 60s, with a penis longer than most. When it came time for a simple prostate procedure, what should have been a routine operation became a struggle. We had to adapt instruments, adjust techniques, and even then, it was far from smooth. He lay on the table under anesthesia, not knowing the difficulty we were facing. But when I spoke with him afterward, I told him honestly, his anatomy had complicated the surgery. He looked at me stunned, almost betrayed. His whole life, people had told him that his size was a blessing. Yet in this moment, it became his biggest medical disadvantage. Think about that for a moment. A larger penis can mean longer surgical times, greater risks of complications, and more stress on the medical team performing the procedure. And when you're older, every minute under anesthesia matters. Every additional risk can make recovery harder. What many men don't realize is that prostate surgery, bladder procedures, even something as simple as catheterization, all of these become more challenging when the anatomy stretches beyond the instruments built for it. I've seen procedures where reaching the prostate felt like navigating a tunnel that simply would not end. Precision becomes more difficult, and precision is exactly what we need when operating in such a delicate area. For men in their 60s and 70s, this is not just an inconvenience, it's a reality that can affect outcomes. A procedure that should restore quality of life can instead leave behind complications, longer recovery, or even regret. And what breaks my heart is hearing men say, "I thought being big was supposed to protect me." But in medicine, bigger often means harder. And not in the way you might think. So while the world may tell you that size is power, in the operating room, it's often the opposite. Size complicates, slows, and endangers. And that is a truth very few men consider until they are lying in a hospital bed, facing the consequences. Yet, as uncomfortable as surgery might sound, there's another place where size creates daily frustration and even public humiliation. It happens not under the surgeon's light, but in the simple privacy of a bathroom. And it's the third truth that might surprise you the most. Truth number 3, the toilet trap. Public humiliation and daily frustration. This next truth may sound almost comical at first, but I can assure you it is one of the most frustrating and humiliating realities that men with large penises face every single day. It's not about sex, it's not about surgery, it's not even about health in the traditional sense. It's about something far more ordinary, the simple act of using the bathroom. I've had countless men, especially those in their 60s and 70s, confide in me about how difficult and embarrassing it can be to navigate public restrooms or even toilets at home when their size becomes an obstacle. In the United States, most toilets are designed with high water levels. To someone of average size, this may not be an issue, but for a man with a longer penis, it becomes a nightmare. Imagine sitting down to relieve yourself, only to feel the cold, unsanitary splash of toilet water against the most private part of your body. It's unhygienic, it's uncomfortable, And it leaves you feeling ashamed in a way that words can barely capture. Many of my patients over the years have described avoiding public restrooms altogether, simply because they cannot bear the thought of dipping into dirty water. Others confessed to carrying tissues or even makeshift barriers with them whenever they traveled. And it's not just America. In Europe, toilets often have less water, but the design still creates another problem: the rim of the bowl. Men with larger size frequently end up brushing against the porcelain itself. Think about that. A public toilet, touched by hundreds of strangers, and suddenly you are forced into direct contact. It's more than inconvenient, it's degrading. At an age where dignity matters more than ever, being forced into situations like this chips away at self-respect in ways that few people can understand unless they've lived it. I remember a patient in his 70s, a proud grandfather, who admitted to me with tears in his eyes that he dreaded road trips with his family. While everyone else could stop at a rest area and use the restroom without a second thought, he would stand outside pretending not to need it, too embarrassed to explain why. What should be one of life's simplest tasks had become a source of quiet humiliation, all because of something men are told they should feel proud of. It's moments like these that reveal the truth. Bigger is not better when it interferes with your daily life. It is not a blessing when it turns a bathroom into a battlefield or forces you to plan your life around avoiding embarrassment. For men over 60, when health, comfort, and peace of mind are paramount, the last thing you need is to be haunted by something as routine as going to the toilet. And yet, while this kind of humiliation is enough to make any man reconsider his ideas about size, there is another consequence that cuts even deeper. It reaches into the heart of intimacy itself. Because when a man is too large, it is not just his dignity that suffers. It is often his partner who pays the price. That is the fourth truth you need to hear. Truth number 4. Too big for comfort. The pain of intimacy. This truth is one that many men never consider until they experience it firsthand. We live in a culture that glorifies the idea of bigger is better when it comes to masculinity, but I've spent decades in my office listening to couples in pain because of that very belief. For a man, having a large penis may seem like the ultimate badge of pride. But for many women, especially as they age, it can become a source of discomfort, even fear. Intimacy, which should bring closeness and joy, instead turns into something dreaded. I remember a couple in their mid-60s who came to see me after years of struggling in silence. The husband had always been told he was blessed with his size, but as his wife grew older, intercourse became painful for her. She endured it at first, not wanting to hurt his feelings, but over time the pain was unbearable. What should have been a source of connection drove them apart, leaving both feeling rejected and misunderstood. When they sat in my office, she finally broke down and admitted that she avoided intimacy altogether because she feared the pain. He looked shattered, not because of rejection, but because he realized something he had always thought of as an asset was now destroying the bond he cherished most. The truth is, vaginas come in different shapes and depths, and many women, especially after menopause, experience changes that make them more sensitive. A penis that is too large can cause tearing, bleeding, and long-lasting discomfort. This isn't just a physical problem, it creates deep emotional wounds. For the man, there is frustration and confusion, a sense of failure despite having what others might consider an advantage. For the woman, there is guilt and dread, torn between wanting closeness and fearing the pain that comes with it. As a doctor, I have seen tears in the eyes of both partners as they admit that the very thing they thought would make their intimacy stronger has, in fact, pushed them further apart. History itself tells us this is not new. Even Viking sagas, written nearly 1,000 years ago, recorded stories of men whose penises were so large that they were unable to consummate their marriages. Imagine that. Tales passed down for centuries about size being a curse, not a blessing. And still, here we are today, with men of all ages convinced they should want more, when in reality, more often brings pain. As men grow older, intimacy takes on a different meaning. It's not just about physical performance anymore. It's about tenderness, connection, trust, and the ability to bring pleasure without causing harm. That is why I always tell my patients, when it comes to love, compatibility is far more important than size. A smaller or average penis can bring joy and satisfaction, while a larger one can turn something sacred into something destructive. And while intimacy may be the most private place where size creates problems, it is far from the only one. Because even when you are not with your partner, even when you are simply out in the world, your size can become impossible to hide. And that leads us to the fifth truth, perhaps the most shocking of all: how a large penis can threaten not only your health and relationships, but also your reputation, your career, and the way society sees you as a man. Truth number 5. The social burden. You can't hide it. This last truth is one that men rarely think about until they live through it. Having a large penis is not something you can keep private. It follows you everywhere, and eventually the world notices. At first, that might sound flattering, but the reality is far different. I've listened to older patients share stories of embarrassment, discomfort, even humiliation, not because of what they did wrong, but because their bodies drew unwanted attention. Buying underwear becomes an ordeal. Pants never seem to fit right, and in places like the locker room or gym, the whispers start. Some men have told me that other guys tried to sneak photos of them in the shower, just for a laugh or to post online. Others described coworkers making jokes, or worse, assuming that they were aroused during meetings when, in truth, they weren't at all. For one man, the misunderstanding cost him his job. His employer claimed he was behaving inappropriately simply because the outline of his anatomy was impossible to ignore. He sat in my office devastated, asking how something he never asked for could ruin his reputation. And with women, the story is often no easier. Many reduce the man to nothing more than his size, curious only about the experience rather than the person. Over time, this strips away dignity and makes it difficult to know who values you for who you are, not what you carry. For men in their 60s, who care deeply about respect and legacy, this becomes a heavy burden. So yes, a large penis may seem like a blessing to outsiders, but the man who lives with it often feels differently. Health risks, medical complications, daily frustrations, intimacy struggles, and now the social burden. All of it adds up to one powerful truth: life is hardest at the extremes. And in the conclusion, I'll tell you why being average may be the greatest gift nature ever gave you, and why it's time to let go of the panic about being small. Conclusion: the truth about size and peace of mind. After decades as a urologist, I can tell you that life is rarely kind to men at either extreme. The small penis panic that so many carry in silence is misplaced, because the real hardships often fall on the men who are too large. We've seen it together. The risk of fracture, the complications in surgery, the humiliation in something as simple as using a toilet, the pain it can cause in intimacy, and the social burden of never being able to hide. These are not theories. They are the lived realities of men I have cared for. And so I say this not just as a doctor, but as someone who has walked alongside thousands of men through their struggles. Average is not a curse, it is a gift. If you are over 60 and still worrying about being small, let go of that fear. Your value is not measured in inches, but in health, love, and dignity.